Imagine, like, walking into a massive air traffic control center. You expect to see this calm, hyper-organized room.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone focus.
Right. Controllers speaking in those quiet tones, tracking neat little green dots gliding across their radar screens. You assume there's a safety net, like a master plan.
Well, you have to assume the people in charge have a system, right?
Yeah.
Because the alternative is just unsettling.
Yeah, but then you look closer at the screens and suddenly those neat green dots are flashing red, alarms are blaring, and when you look over at the lead controllers, they aren't even looking at the radar. They're locked in a heated argument over what to order for lunch.
Which is terrifying.
Right. Today, we are stepping into a geopolitical control room that looks remarkably similar to that exact scenario.
We really are. We have a pretty massive, sobering stack of raw intelligence to unpack with you today. We're looking at this highly classified style slide deck. It's titled The Executive Threat Matrix, August 2026.
And we've got a stack of corroborating global news reports right alongside it. Wall Street Journal, CNN, Financial Times, The Economist. So the mission for this deep dive is to synthesize this global snapshot of, flashpoints, force readiness, domestic stability, and figure out the true volatility index of August 2026.
Exactly. But before we get into the weeds, we should probably set some ground rules.
Oh, yeah, definitely. If you are looking at this matrix with us, you have to separate your own politics from the raw data. Our job today isn't to take a political side. We're simply acting as your intelligence analysts, looking at the raw data, the media narratives, and the stated policies provided in this briefing.
Right, we're just here to show you exactly what the threat matrix looks like right now. Not endorsing anything, just mapping the terrain.
Exactly. So let's dive in.
Well, in any threat matrix, you always have to start with the fuse that's burning fastest, right?
Yeah.
And right now, all eyes are on the Middle East.
Yeah, the core geopolitical flashpoint here is that the 60-day memorandum of understanding between the U.S. and Iran is officially expiring on Monday. And the Wall Street Journal is reporting that talks haven't just slowed down, they are entirely stalled.
They're dead in the water. And, markets are highly sensitive to that kind of diplomatic vacuum. The Journal noted the U.S. dollar just hit a 10-day low against currency baskets. But honestly, the most revealing metric in this deck is the logistics.
It's shipping data. Right?
Yeah, the data from Koppler. It shows that shipping traffic through the Strait of Hormuz has essentially flatlined. And Koppler, they aren't just sending out surveys. They use real-time satellite tracking and algorithmic modeling to monitor global tanker movements.
So they see everything.
They see everything. And when their data shows the water is empty, it means maritime commerce has effectively halted in one of the world's most critical energy corridors.
Wow. But, okay, looking at the U.S. executive response to this bottleneck, that's what really jumps out at me. The briefing highlights that President Trump has publicly threatened to, quote, bomb Oman if they get in the way of these stalled Iran negotiations.
Yeah, that's a massive shift.
I mean, Oman has historically been the quiet, neutral mediator in the region, right? Threatening military action against your primary diplomatic back channel just seems completely counterintuitive.
Well, it fundamentally alters the diplomatic architecture. When you threaten the neutral ground, you eliminate the safe space where informal de-escalatory conversations happen. You're basically burning down the negotiating table.
Right. Okay, let me push back on the economic ripple effect here for a second, though. I use this traffic jam analogy. I understand the Strait of Hormuz getting blocked. That's a huge local traffic jam. But I'm looking at the Financial Times sources in our deck, and shipping rates are simultaneously jumping in the Panama Canal, the Rhine River, the Red Sea, the Black Sea.
It's everywhere.
Yeah. How does a diplomatic breakdown with Iran suddenly make it more expensive to ship, I don't know, a barge down a river in Germany?
It's what analysts call the cascading choke point effect. It comes down to the physical mechanics of global maritime supply. You have to remember, the global supply chain operates on this incredibly tight margin of available vessels.
There's no backup fleet just waiting around.
Exactly. When a primary artery like the Strait of Hormuz becomes unnavigable, these massive cargo and energy vessels don't just sit there waiting. They reroute. They usually take the long way around the Horn of Africa.
Which adds, what, weeks to the trip?
Weeks. And that added time is the critical variable. Because a single journey now takes weeks longer, those specific ships are physically tied up. They're unavailable for their next scheduled jobs. So suddenly, the global pool of available cargo ships just shrinks dramatically.
By 6.
Yeah, if a logistics company wants to move goods through the Panama Canal or the Rhine, they're now bidding on a vastly reduced supply of hulls. Demand stays exactly the same, supply plummets, and boom, prices skyrocket across the entire global circulatory system simultaneously.
Wow. Okay, that makes total sense. So the macroeconomy takes this massive hit. But looking back at the threat matrix, the ground level reality for troops stationed in the region is getting highly personal. Let's talk about this asymmetric escalation slide.
This is one of the more chilling parts of the briefing.
Yeah, the Iranian military has placed a direct bounty on U.S. forces. General Amir Hatami of the Iranian army announced a $30,000 reward, which is like 5 billion tomans in their currency, for the death or capture of any U.S. soldier.
And this isn't just internal posturing. International media is tracking it aggressively. France 24, The Telegraph, they're both reporting on it.
Oh.
The Iranian state news agency, IRNA, is broadcasting it domestically, openly vowing to continue resistance until the complete defeat of the U.S. and Israel.
But here's where it gets really interesting to me. There's this bizarre modifier in the source data. The bounty payout officially doubles to $60,000 if the capture or killing is conducted by a woman.
Yeah, that specific detail stands out.
Why include that? I mean, my first instinct is that it's just pure propaganda for their domestic audience, or is there an actual tactical advantage they're trying to achieve there?
It's actually a highly calculated piece of psychological warfare, and it works on multiple levels.
Hmm.
First, they deeply understand Western media algorithms.
Okay.
By offering double for a female operative, they basically guarantee sensationalized, prolonged coverage in the West. It turns a standard threat into a viral headline, which amplifies their threat projection way beyond their actual military footprint.
That's wild, but does it change anything on the ground?
Oh, absolutely. It's designed to induce deep paranoia in U.S. patrols. If every single civilian interaction, regardless of gender, carries a doubled financial incentive for violence, U.S. forces have to adopt a much more defensive, suspicious posture.
Because literally anyone could be trying to collect the bounty.
Exactly. And that degrades their ability to build local relationships and gather intelligence, which, is the absolute cornerstone of regional stability.
So if U.S. forces are bogged down in that level of localized paranoia, and U.S. diplomacy is busy threatening regional mediators like Oman, that leaves a massive vacuum.
Nature abhors a vacuum.
Right. And the Matrix shows neighboring nations are not just waiting around to see what happens, they're actively filling it. Let's look at this autonomy pivot slide.
Yes. The regional realignment. This is huge. We're looking at a new independent defense pact being formalized between Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Pakistan.
And The Economist coverage explicitly notes this is happening squarely in the shadow of the U.S.-Iran friction. And the primary beneficiaries right now aren't American defense contractors, they're Turkish arms producers who are just stepping right into the void.
They're capitalizing on it perfectly.
It's like, imagine living in a house where the primary leaseholder is constantly fighting with the neighbors, screaming through the walls. So you and the other roommates quietly sign a side lease on a different apartment across town without telling them, just to hedge your bets.
That's a perfect analogy.
But why Turkey? Why are they the anchor replacing U.S. leverage here?
Well, Turkey has systematically built a highly agile, export-focused defense industry over the last decade. Their Bayraktar drones, for example, have proven incredibly effective in modern conflicts. But more importantly, Turkey offers advanced military technology without the massive bureaucratic red tape.
No congressional approval.
Exactly. No congressional holdups, no human rights stipulations that the U.S. usually attaches to arms sales. Saudi Arabia and Pakistan are looking at the volatility of U.S. leadership and deciding that Turkish tech is just a more reliable, straightforward investment right now.
Which signifies a massive long-term erosion of U.S. diplomatic leverage. Because once they build military infrastructure that doesn't rely on Washington, Washington loses its ability to influence their behavior down the line.
Precisely. And the thing is, that erosion isn't just confined to the Middle East. The Matrix shows a massive simultaneous pivot happening in the Pacific theater as well.
Yeah, let's move to the Pacific. The primary data point here is the sudden reduction in the U.S.-South Korea joint military drills, the Ulchi Freedom Shield exercises.
Right.
Based on the media consensus in our stacked WSJ, CBS, Sky News, the stated executive rationale for scaling these back is that they are hostile and too expensive. The briefing cites President Trump explicitly noting his, quote, very good relationship with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un as the reason to draw them down.
It's a highly personalized approach to theater strategy.
So let me play devil's advocate for a second. We know these massive multinational drills cost hundreds of millions of dollars, right? With inflation high, budgets tight, Isn't it possible this is just a pragmatic cost-saving measure? Like, if you cut back on insurance to save money, it is technically cost-effective until your house burns down. If personal diplomacy is holding the peace, why spend the money?
Well, the danger there lies in the actual mechanics of multinational warfare. Deterrence isn't just some theoretical concept. It requires deep physical interoperability.
What does that look like in practice?
When the U.S. and South Korea run these massive drills, they are testing complex logistics. It's figuring out how different communication systems talk to each other under jamming, how supply chains share aviation fuel on the fly, how air and naval assets coordinate targeting in real time. That requires muscle memory.
It's not something you can just wing on the day of a crisis.
Exactly. If you stop running those drills, that muscle memory atrophies incredibly fast. Military personnel cycle out every few years. If a conflict breaks out after a prolonged pause in joint exercises, you essentially have two allied militaries trying to figure out how to work together while under fire.
Which is a nightmare.
It is. Replacing structural practice deterrence with the fragility of a personal relationship between leaders leaves the entire theater vulnerable to just a sudden shift in mood.
Okay, so if the overarching goal in the Pacific is genuinely cost-cutting, we have to look at what's actually happening to the physical assets currently deployed there. And this leads us to the ground truth section on force readiness.
Yeah, the diagnostic on fleet readiness is pretty dire.
The reporting from CNN here is just stark. We're looking at the operational reality of major capital ships. Take the USS Benfold, an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer.
A frontline warfighter.
Right. CNN reports that the Benfold lost power entirely for 4 days while operating in the blistering heat of the South China Sea. 4 days. Sailors were left without working toilets, without air conditioning, without hot food. It sounds like being trapped in a broken elevator during a summer heat wave, except that elevator is a multi-billion-dollar warship that's supposed to be projecting global power.
It's catastrophic for readiness.
How does a ship like that just go completely dark for almost a week?
A failure of that magnitude is almost always the symptom of a deeply strained logistical tail. High-tech warships require constant preventative maintenance.
Right.
And a steady flow of proprietary replacement parts.
Which ties back to the shipping choke points we were just talking about.
Exactly. When global supply chains fracture, navies are forced to make really hard choices.
Yeah.
They start cannibalizing parts from ships in dry dock just to keep deployed ships running. Eventually, a minor generator failure cascades into a total blackout because the backup systems haven't been properly maintained or supplied.
Man. And it's not an isolated incident either. Pamela Brown's reporting for CNN on the USS Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier paints this really similar picture.
Yeah, the morale diagnostic on the Lincoln is very concerning.
She reports a deeply degraded morale status, noting what she calls a messy narrative, where genuine operational hardship and resilience are basically sharing quarters. I mean, an aircraft carrier is supposed to be the ultimate projection of sovereign power. When it's operating more like a survival endurance test just to keep the lights on and the toilets flushing, something is deeply wrong.
What's fascinating and alarming here is the juxtaposition. We have an expiring ceasefire, massive regional shifts, bounties on troops, but the tip of the U.S. spear is currently fighting just to maintain basic life support systems.
Which brings up the natural follow-up question. With red lights blinking across this entire global dashboard, how is this landing with the public back home? And more importantly, what is leadership actually focusing on right now?
Well, the domestic indicators slide really quantifies the political fallout. We're fewer than 80 days out from the midterms in this scenario.
Right.
An Axios report indicates that even baseline Republican voters are souring on the administration. They're pointing to 3 primary drivers: high prices from the shipping crisis, anxiety over persistent foreign conflicts, and growing corruption anxiety.
And that corruption anxiety leads us directly into the executive focus slide of our deck. Analysts call this the distraction funnel.
Yes, the distraction funnel.
Because instead of navigating the Pacific Fleet's logistical collapse or the Strait of Hormuz bottleneck, executive bandwidth is being channeled into these hyper-domestic, deeply personal priorities.
The briefing details several distinct vectors of distraction, and they're all coming directly from the source material. First, you have the financial distraction. ABC News is reporting that a Trump-linked crypto venture called World Liberty Trust was just granted formal bank status by a Trump-appointed regulator.
Okay, wait. Aircraft carriers are losing power in the South China Sea, and the executive branch's top public priority is a crypto bank. I mean, why does a family business venture even make it onto a global intelligence matrix?
Because granting formal bank status to a cryptocurrency venture directly tied to the executive branch creates a massive structural vulnerability. Anti-money laundering compliance in the crypto space is notoriously complex. It's opaque.
So it's a backdoor.
Exactly. If foreign adversaries or state-backed actors want to silently inject capital to buy influence or leverage, they now have a state-approved, highly obfuscated financial vehicle to do it. It blurs the line between sovereign national security and personal financial liquidity.
Yeah.
That generates massive conflict of interest warnings globally.
Wow. And while that massive financial maneuver is happening, the primary legislative push highlighted in the briefing coming straight from Truth Social has absolutely nothing to do with supply chains or military readiness. It is a massive push demanding the Senate pass the No More Changing the Clocks Act.
Making daylight saving time permanent.
Yes. Is this an intentional, like, look over here, not over there distraction strategy, or is it a genuine disconnect from the crises at hand?
Well, from an intelligence perspective, whether it's an intentional zone flooding strategy or just genuine chaos is almost irrelevant. The outcome is what matters. It's a masterclass in dominating the domestic news cycle with a relatable, low-stakes issue.
And the funnel doesn't even stop there. The source stack highlights other side stories just flooding the zone. There's an escalating, highly public spat between Senator Jon Ossoff and Harp. There's an ongoing, high-profile executive lawsuit against the BBC.
It creates complete sensory overload.
It really does. You combine an Ossoff-Harp feud, suing foreign media, a daylight saving time crusade, and a family crypto bank.
It's just noise everywhere.
And that noise paralyzes the policy apparatus. When the executive branch is bogged down in personal litigation with the BBC and localized political spats, the National Security Council does not get the rapid decisions they need regarding Pacific Fleet logistics or Middle Eastern diplomacy. The whole bureaucratic machine just stalls.
Which brings us perfectly to the final piece of this briefing, the strategic synthesis matrix. This really brings it all together by contrasting stated policy versus ground truth. Right. If you look at the Middle East, the stated policy is an aggressive, hardline threatening omen, abandoning talks. But the ground truth is sheer vulnerability. We're talking expiring ceasefires, active bounties, and completely choked shipping lanes.
And then in the Asia-Pacific theater, the stated policy is cost-cutting de-escalation, pulling back on those joint drills to save money. But the ground truth is severe fleet degradation, with capital ships losing power and deterrence actively eroding.
So the briefing delivers a final volatility assessment based on all of this. External volatility is categorized as critical, but the true systemic risk identified here is that leadership alignment is misdirected. It's hyper-focused on personal ventures and domestic squabbles rather than actively managing these converging threat vectors.
This raises a really important question for me. We've laid out this matrix completely neutrally today. But if you're a foreign adversary, if you're sitting in Tehran or Beijing looking at this exact same dashboard, do you see a U.S. that is intentionally unpredictable to keep you guessing, the classic madman theory? Or do you just see a U.S. that is fundamentally distracted and weak?
That's the billion-dollar question. The historical reality of the madman theory is that it only works if the adversary firmly believes you possess the overwhelming operational capacity to destroy them if provoked.
You have to be able to back it up.
Exactly. If you threaten to bomb a nation, but simultaneously your guided missile destroyers are losing power, and your executive branch is publicly consumed by daylight saving time and suing the BBC, the threat lacks physical credibility. Adversaries are highly rational actors. They look at the logistics, not the rhetoric.
And the logistics here are blinking red.
Right. The logistics in this matrix signal a genuine systemic vulnerability. That is what makes this specific window of time so precarious.
Well, to you, listening to this analysis, thank you for stepping into the control room with us today to unpack this intelligence briefing. We've traced these wild threads from river shipping rates in Germany all the way to engineering failures in the South China Sea.
It really is a stark reminder of how interconnected and fragile the whole global architecture truly is.
It is. And I want to leave you with a lingering thought that builds on everything we've covered today. Think back to that Saudi-Turkey-Pakistan defense pact. If the world's most critical regions look at the U.S. and decide that American leadership is simply too distracted by crypto banking, clock changes, and political feuds to be relied upon, and they successfully build their own security and economic architectures without us, does America risk permanently pricing itself out of global influence, regardless of who sits in the Oval Office next?
It's definitely something to chew on.
Keep digging deeper, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.